Hello everyone, welcome to your PSHE session for this week. Obviously we've been looking a little bit at trying to improve your own knowledge of the Black Lives Matter movement, white privilege, systemic racism, all of these terms that are used in the media and are really important, but we can only interpret what we're told in the media with knowledge and understanding. And that's what these sessions really have been about, trying to help you to develop that knowledge and understanding of your own. What I want to look at today is the idea of protest, because obviously there's been quite a lot of protests recently, and I just wanted to consider some of the different perspectives and attitudes on what's been happening in the world. Okay, first of all, can you please copy and complete these two sentences? Firstly, the Black Lives Matter movement exists because systemic racism is a complex term, but it means. If you could pause the video and have a go at answering those two sentences, that'd be super, thank you. Okay, great. If you would like your sentences checked, please can you send them to your PSHE teacher. Okay, so we live in a democracy, and I don't want to oversimplify this too much, but a quick overview. A democracy is defined as a system of government by the whole population or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives. So basically, adults of 18 years or older are able to vote for who they want to represent them. So the people who make the rules and have power in this country are voted for by people. And whoever gets the most votes is the person who has the power, in very basic terms. I've oversimplified that massively. It's a word that derives from ancient Greek. A demos means people and kratia means power. So more or less, we're talking about the idea that people have power to choose who represents them. It first appeared in ancient Greek, and although their version of democracy is very different to what we perceive as democracy, it was about people having strength, the common people having strength and influence over the world they lived in. Now, one of the things that people have a right to do in a democracy is to protest. And protests have happened a lot throughout history. People organise protests as a way of publicly making their opinions heard in an attempt to influence public opinion or government policy. So if people feel something's wrong in the world and they want other people to change or to understand things from their perspective, they might put together a protest. Direct action designed to bring about change. And there are several reasons people feel it's important to protest. I've just picked 4. It creates unity. People like to work together and realise they're not alone in caring about an issue. You can challenge people who are in power. One person challenging someone in power may be ignored, but a large group working together is harder to ignore. Provides a voice for minority groups, and in theory it can change the world we live in. The world can become fairer and kinder and more equal through people putting their collective voices together. And I've just got here some examples of historical protests which have done just that have brought about change. You can research these further, you can pause these slide and read these little boxes. But they're just a few examples of times when people have joined together to argue against something in the world, to offer something different, and they have changed the world we live in. Now, of course, sometimes we see on the news that protests become violent. And I think there's, again, lots of reasons why that happens. I've just come up with 4 ideas. When people are very passionate and upset about a topic, feelings can overflow. I think sadly, some people who join in the protest aren't actually interested in the cause. They only go because they want they enjoy conflict and confrontation. Sometimes in a protest, you have people with opposite views coming into contact, and people can get angry with each other. And sometimes people feel that peaceful protest isn't working, powerful people are ignoring them. So I'm not advocating violent protest at all. I'm just seeking to explain some of the reasons why potentially sometimes we see violence. And of course, we've seen lots of Black Lives Matter protests in June of 2020, where people have taken to the streets all over the world to protest about the treatment of black people and to fight against systemic racism. And one of the things that happened as a result of a protest in Bristol was the removal of a statue, which you may or may not have seen. Now, a statue is a freestanding sculpture which is a full-length figure of a person or animal. Usually, there's variations, but mostly the statues we have in our towns and cities are full-length figures of people. And often they were produced a long time ago. Statues have been an important part of culture from prehistory to the present day. Sometimes they're meant to be artistic, just to make places look better, but often they're built to commemorate people. And they're often seen as a symbol of power, because somebody who maybe lived in the 17th century and their statue's still in the world today, well, they're a lasting version of that person. So statues can be really interesting, but they can also create quite strong feelings. And obviously the people who chose to pull down the statue of Edward Colston in Bristol felt strongly about it. And the reason for that is because Edward Colston was a slave trader. So he was involved in transporting men, women and children from Africa to the Americas to use in the slave trade. And that's why some people felt so passionately that it was wrong to put up a life-size monument to him to say he was a good person. Now, on the other hand, when he died, he left a lot of money to charity. So some people think that actually, yes, slavery is abhorrent and a crime against humanity, but it also is historical. And that pulling down the statue actually does nothing to change what happened in history. People have been campaigning for a long time for the statue to be removed, and it might be difficult sometimes to understand why people think it's so important. So before we look at the reasons why people think statues should stay, this clip, there's a little news clip here that you can watch, which will give you some views and perspectives from the BBC. If you go back to Show My Homework, I've shared a link to this clip there, so you can click on it directly from Show My Homework. It just gives you some people's perspective of how they feel about statues in our towns and cities. Now, of course, not everybody agrees that it was right to take down the statue. Some people really strongly feel that we should keep statues because they are a sign of history. And some history we can look back at with pride, some of which we can't. But that pulling down monuments is not the way to go. So I've got two conflicting opinions on that here. We've got the historian who said statues are about saying this was a great man who did great things. That is not true. He, Colston, was a slave trader and a murderer. So he feels that it's right that the statue was taken down, that the people pulled it down, because it shows that we're saying we can't just accept that he was a great man. Priti Patel, our Home Secretary, called the tearing down the statue utterly disgraceful. It speaks to the acts of public disorder that have become a distraction from the cause people are protesting about. So one person who thinks it was right to pull it down, one person who thinks it was wrong. What I'd like you to do is to think about your own thoughts and opinions on this. Do you think statues that commemorate people involved in racism should be removed? And I know this is a hugely complex topic to come up with an answer for, but using what you've heard from these two different people, you can obviously do a little bit of your own research as well. What are your thoughts? Going on from that, since that was pulled down, lots more has happened. So you can see here, another statue has been removed. Ant and Dec have asked for some of their previous footage of themselves impersonating people of colour. They've asked for it to be removed. In Plymouth, Sir John Hawkins Square, the signs have been removed because Sir John Hawkins is another individual who was involved in the slave trade. So you can see how lots of discussion is happening, lots of dialogue around how best to remember the history, but also to respect people of all ethnicities. What I've got for you here, if in case you'd like to look at it, and again this is optional, is a poem written by a poet in Bristol. And as an English teacher, obviously I love a little bit of poetry. And she just sets out through poetry how she felt about the statue and its removal. So if you would like to, you could have a little listen to that. There's a transcription here so you could read the poem and just use it to reflect on your own thoughts around what do statues represent, and what is appropriate for us to have in our towns and cities. Thanks, guys.